Hello everybody, welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Oana.
We are going to talk today about foreclosures in Las Vegas. And we're actually talking about foreclosures everywhere. Okay, so there's this thing going around about potential market crash in Las Vegas and parts of the country. And it's based on this idea that there's all these houses that are going to be foreclosed because people haven't been paying the mortgage, right? And we want to, and I know very well from the last bust of real estate that there were tons of foreclosures, a lot of them, and that it happened all over the country, and that the number of foreclosures caused a rise in inventory. So what we're going to do is analyze with actual data that we have. It's accurate data, and it comes from HUD. It's FHA data on delinquent foreclosures, and we're going to make a decision of whether what we think is going to happen with foreclosures. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's talk in general about what's going on right now compared with last time, as far as foreclosures. Okay, this time we have pretty tight lending.
We do.
We have very tight lending.
We do. So this tight lending has actually benefited everyone.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is because the lending is tight, everybody had to come to the table with some money, which means everybody has some equity built in from the start. Plus, we've seen over the last couple years appreciation that is incredibly robust. I mean, there are some areas that have appreciated 20% year over year.
Now, what that means is if you bought a house with FHA and put the least amount down, you now have a ton of equity. So even if you haven't made a payment in a year, big deal. You just sell the house and you go rent or whatever. It's not that big of a problem. When that becomes a problem is when you're upside down in the house and you're behind in payments.
Right.
That's a big problem because then it creates a chain.
Right.
Okay.
So right now what's happening is most Americans have at least 10% of their home value in equity, which is huge.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a benefit. Now that means that people who have not been making their mortgage payments for a year, 18 months, they actually still have equity. So if their forbearance runs out and they are not able to work out a loan modification or some kind of a plan with their lender, they can go ahead and sell the property, pay off the loan, pay all the fees associated with selling the property, and still put money in their pockets. This is an amazing thing, which is different than what happened before. What happened before was that people owed more for the house than what it was worth. So that's when they ended up with a short sale, or that's when they ended up with a foreclosure. But that's not what's happening this time. People have equity, which means that the house is worth more than what is owed on it, plus fees to sell it.
Okay, so we're going to jump into the first chart. And the first chart we're going to put up is the number of FHA loans that are in default. Now, if you look at the bottom here, you'll see it goes from the top is May, which is the most current, and the bottom is September, which was last year. And you can see in September that 17.5% of all FHA loans were delinquent. What that means is they were behind on a payment. They'd missed a payment. And then seriously delinquent was they'd missed 3 payments. They were behind by 3 months. You can see that number as you look up the chart and you go through 2020 and the beginning of 2021, that went from 17.5% to 14.7% delinquent rate. So that's a lot. It's 3% of all loans, but of delinquent loans, it's like 20% of them. 20% of delinquent loans are not delinquent anymore, that were delinquent last September. And then with serious delinquent, about 10% of those aren't seriously delinquent. Now, some of the people sold.
Right.
Some of them just got the cash and made up on it. Some of them turned it into a rental maybe and cash flowed potentially, so they had incentive to do that. So this trend is pretty good.
It is.
What would be bad is if the trend was going the wrong way. So while this is higher than normal, and these numbers you're looking at are higher than normal, they're actually good because they're trending the right direction.
They are. The other thing to kind of consider is for a variety of reasons, a lot of people have not put their homes on the market, because what we're seeing inventory levels really, really low. And part of the reason why we're seeing inventory levels being so low is kind of wrapped up in this too, people who have not been able to make payments, so and that sort of thing, so people who maybe would have sold and bought something else and that sort of thing, there would have been this churn in the market, and that hasn't happened. So this low inventory, part of it can be attributed to all of this as well.
So we're going to go to the next slide. Now the next slide we're going to show you are the 10 most threatened metro areas based on FHA delinquency rates. Now, the reason why FHA is the most interesting one is because we don't really care about conventional, because they have 20% down probably. So you're probably saying, well, yeah, but this is just FHA. But these are the loans traditionally that cause the problems. You get a lot of FHA loans, they go into foreclosure, they flood the market, and then prices start to come down, and then it starts to hit all the other loans, okay? But the other loans right now aren't a problem, the conventional loans, because everyone not only had to put 20% down, they have a ton of equity. So most of these conventional, people that bought conventional have 30, 40% of equity, and they're fine. So you're probably wondering, oh, well, where's Las Vegas? So this is what I want you to do. I want you to think of the top 10. The top 10 markets where it's probably the worst for potential foreclosures. Now, let's keep this in mind. The number one state last year that had the worst unemployment was Hawaii, because there were tourists, completely tourism. And then number 2 was Nevada, also mostly tourism, a lot of tourism, right? So you think of a number between 1 and 10 where you think it is. We're going to give an award to somebody who guesses the exact number where Las Vegas is. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to throw up the chart, the 10 most threatened based on FHA delinquency rates. We'll start with number 10, which is Philadelphia. They have about 17% that are total delinquent, about 11.5%. Then the next is Fort Worth, which is Texas, of course. Then San Antonio. After that's Riverside. Now Riverside was was getting foreclosed in the last boom, right? After that is Baltimore, the Baltimore area. Columbia, Towson, that's all in Maryland. Washington, and the Arlington, Alexandria, D.C. area. So that's the city of Washington, D.C., and then the area around it. Dallas, which is a separate market from Fort Worth. They're considered separate markets. MSA, they're called marketing service areas. It's a government thing, okay? Then Chicago. Chicago has unique problems because it has people leaving, and it has high unemployment and crime and some other stuff. You can see that has a pretty good delinquency rate there too. Houston, the Woodlands, Sugarland, that's in a very big area, but it's a very rural, spread out geography. And there was a lot of growth there over the last few years, and a lot of builders, people are building there. And then number 1 is Atlanta. Okay, so when you notice these areas, we notice that there's only one California market, that there's no Arizona markets. Idaho is not in here. Colorado is not in here. That Nashville, Tennessee is not in here. Florida, there's nothing in Florida in here that's in the top 10. And guess what else is not in the top 10?
Us, Las Vegas.
Las Vegas isn't in the top 10. We certainly were in the top 10 the last market crash. If we weren't 1, we were 2, and it was close, right? So what this leads us to believe is that there could be some markets that are affected negatively. Because of the trend that we showed you on the previous chart, where these the foreclosures or the numbers of delinquent loans are declining, that's a really good sign. It kind of leads that there could potentially be a soft landing to this appreciation of home prices. Just because prices go up does not mean they're going to go down. And I'll give you an example. When are college tuition rates going to collapse, right? Because those things have been going. If you looked at the graph if I showed you a graph of college tuition rates, you'd probably say it was Ethereum or Dogecoin or something, right? You'd be, that's not sustainable. Well, so when's that going to crash, right?
So, we named all these markets that are the top 10 markets that are showing some difficulties. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is that real estate is hyper-local. So just because Atlanta is number 1 on this chart does not mean that applies to all of Atlanta. It is more than likely it's specific zip codes and not all of it.
Yeah, areas where there were a large amount of people that left, or sectors that have a sector of employment that were harmed, and that people lived in those sectors and then they lost jobs.
Right.
Okay, which is why it's interesting that Hawaii's not in here, that Nevada's not in here as well. But then remember, this is FHA loans, and FHA loans are, as we talked about, they're the ones that are the most risk. They're also the ones that the government tracks the data on, because the government's in charge of all these FHA loans.
They're also the loans with the lowest down payment. So these are the most vulnerable home buyers, if you will. So they're the ones that are most quickly affected by economic downturns.
Yeah, and then something else too. If you look at Las Vegas and what happened here, there were some areas that got really, really crushed. So the overall market here probably dropped 60 to 70% overall. Now, if you were in Lake Las Vegas, it was probably 80%. It was really high there. If you were in some of the high rises, it was really high. But if you were in Summerlin, it maybe only went down half. So in parts of Henderson, prices went down, but they didn't get crushed. If you were in the far south part of town, southwest, or if you were in the far northwest part of town, then you really got hammered. So while these areas show the total number of delinquent loans as a percentage, it's not necessarily the whole market. So in summary, this is good for Las Vegas.
Yes.
Because we don't have, despite having all that unemployment, we certainly don't have a bunch of people in default for FHA loans. Now, one of the reasons is because we have a very relatively low price for homes. A lot of it, remember that, as opposed to right now what's happening where people are paying $400,000 for a house. A lot of these people paid $285,000 for homes, and their payment was reasonable. And it was something they could easily, once they went back to work, they could get caught up on.
Right.
Plus,
the forbearance programs helped a lot with that.
Yeah, the forbearance programs help, plus the fact that they have equity, they can either go get a loan on it, and some of them sold it. So Las Vegas is not in the top 10 for foreclosures. All the people, I believe, that are saying the market's going to crash, I still haven't seen the indicators. We haven't seen inventory increasing, we haven't seen days on the market increasing, and we haven't seen an extremely high level of the FHA delinquency rates. What else? Do we miss anything?
That's it. FHA loans are the canary in the coal mine, and so that is the reason why the government tracks it. That's the reason why we track it too. It's also an easy number to track because the government keeps data on it, and the fact that these numbers are declining month over month as the economy opens up and everybody gets back to life, it's a good sign for everybody. And as people's situations change and maybe they'll bring homes to market, that will help stabilize the market further.
And the other thing too is government has gotten smart. I don't think they expected the depth and breadth of what happened 2006 to 2011 in the housing market. Matter of fact, it was so hard hitting that it not only took out a bunch of major lenders and it took out a big portion of the economy, but they even made a funny movie called The Big Short about all the craziness that went beyond it. And the industry went through this phase of sort of getting rid of a bunch of the craziness that was happening on the finance side. And they squared all that away. The other thing that happened was government took too long to react last time. They came up with a bunch of programs, but this time they were up front with the programs, and they're sort of managing this. And if you're very libertarian or laissez-faire, you should say, hey, government shouldn't be doing this, but they are. And they're trying to prevent this housing market from collapsing because they see what can happen in the broader economy when this happens. So we're still looking good. We're still going to track these numbers. Probably what we'll do is in about 6 months, we'll go back over the foreclosure numbers. We've been tracking. I did a video a while back where we did the foreclosures. I think it was December numbers, and the notice defaults were like 40 a month in Las Vegas, where we've 500,000 houses. It was zero, basically. It was none. But what we'll do is we'll look at this data again in 6 months, and we'll see these FHA delinquent and seriously delinquents. We'll see what the trend is. We'll see if any of the markets change, see if any interesting cities pop up that aren't in there. And so in order for you to know about that video, you have to subscribe, because you'll forget. You won't remember to come back in 6 months. So you just have to watch all our videos between now and 6 months.
Subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video if you liked it, leave us your comments. Our contact information is below. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next video.
All right, bye.
Bye.